matter of fact, I've never addressed myself to the topic of Korach. I never spoke about it. I did think about many of our biblical heroes. Abraham, the patriarchs, Moshe, Aharon, Joseph. I have a series of drushes about Joseph. However, I was not attracted by the figure of care. Lately, just simply by studying the Ramban, I realized that the Korach story was not just a simple event. It was more than that. And actually, the Korach story or the controversy with Moses has great relevance to our time. Many of the complaints we hear now with reference to Orthodox and tradition and they do not reflect echo actually of the complaints by Korach. Now tonight I want to address myself to this topic, particularly to two arguments which Korach has raised against Moses, and I'll try to analyze them in light of modern events, modern philosophy. Because I believe that those two arguments are very important as far as we are concerned. The Korach rebellion was a unique event. Prior to that event, the people complained, protested, murmured spontaneously. Always in response to a physical need. They were confronted with, or to biological pressure. They suffered from tortures, hunger, thirst, sneaky fear of an enemy of the sea. Be it Amalek, be it the serpent, and be it simply the wilderness itself. Because primitive man is afraid not only of living beings, but even of any phenomenon. Let me just read a few psukim. ויסו בני ישראל לפניהם, ונמצרים נשא אחריהם, ויראו מליטה יצחקו. Children of Israel lifted their eyes, and they beheld the Egyptians marching after them. And they were so afraid, and the sons of Israel cried. Cried in the sense, it's not in the colloquial cry, it means to be protested. So if Yitzhak alive, the meaning of cry is protest. Tzoko in Hebrew is basically protest. Simply, fear prompted their protest. Then we read in the Torah, ויראו מורסה, וליוכלו לשתות מים ממורה, כי מורה להם. ויראינו אמר משה רבינו, מה נשתה? And when they came to Mara, they could not drink of the waters of Mara, for they were bitter, and the people murmured against Moses. Yeah? What prompted their protest? Thirst. ויראינו כל הגת בני ישראל על משה ואהרון במדבר ויאמרו עליהם בני ישראל, נהייתם לנו. And the whole congregation of children of Israel murmured against Moses. When we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to satisfaction, we were hungry. A hungry person is an angry person. An angry person is not a silent person, but very loud. ויסו כל הגז בני ישראל, ויחנו ברפידים, ומים לשתות. ויורב אורם ממשה. ויאמרו, תנו לנו מים, ונשתה. And the congregation journeyed and encamped in the city, and there was no water for the people to drink. Wherefore, the people did quarrel with Moses, and said, give us water, that we may drink. There were no political disagreements with Moses, or ideological controversies. There were no rebellions. There was just protests, complaints, and quarrels. And all those protests, complaints, and quarrels were consequences of discomfort and hardship. We were subjected to the first and second year of this sojourn. We wanted to water, wanted food, we were afraid to protest. Even the golden calf episode, the episode of the Eagle of God, was not precipitated by idolatrous ideas that corroded the moral fiber and influenced the philosophy of the people. No, not at all. The golden calf was precipitated by the primitive instinctual horror that befalls the lost sheep in the wilderness, in wide and open spaces. It was a spontaneous reaction to the primordial terror of the jungle. They were lost in the jungle. They thought Moses will never come back. And without Moses, what can they do? How can they survive in the jungle? It is the fear, the instinctual horror. I shouldn't even use the term fear. The instinctual terror and horror which strikes the lost sheep when the latter realizes that it has separated itself from the herd, or from the flock. And the people assembled unto Aaron and said, make us a God who shall go before us, because we lost Moses. In a word, all the previous faults were unorganized, unplanned. Reactions, unplanned, spontaneous reactions to situations that they could not be confronted, that they had to confront, and they did not know how to confront such situations. They were generated, basically, the previous forms, by a mob mentality, which gets easily excited, but also regains easily its equilibrium. The Korach controversy was of a totally different character. Of a totally different character. The rebellion was not due to ungratified physical desire, such as hunger and thirst. Not at all. Second, the crowd was not involved at all. The masses were not involved at all. The mob, which demanded from Aaron should make them a god, which protested in the Kilim, they are thirsty, they want water. Which wanted to stone Moses and Aaron during the Meraglim episode, was not involved at all. The mob did not participate in the anti-Moses campaign. Only individuals. Alright. The leadership consisted of several individuals. The followers, few hundred, most. Hamishim Masayim, Maktir observed. All individuals, mostly of the intellectual elite, of the aristocracy, who were involved. The Torah tells us, the shiur, who they made, Anshe Shem, princes of the congregation, called into the assembly, men of name. This was a rebellion, not just a quarrel, a rebellion. An organized movement, well planned and painstakingly prepared. In short, we may speak, should we use a colloquial legal term, of a Korach conspiracy. There was no conspiracy as far as the episode of the miracle was concerned. No conspiracy. Everything was spontaneous, unorganized, unplanned. The immediate reaction to fear, to the story about the giants. But in Korach it was a conspiracy, premeditated and carefully thought out. It was a real rebellion. Apparently, if we should trace, the history of that rebellion, or what psychologically prompted it, what is the etiology of that rebellion, I believe we should follow the Ramban. The Ramban is excellent. Whatever I say here, about the background, is, you may find the Ramban if you study the Ramban carefully. Apparently, Korach's enmity was incurred by Moshe at the time of the elevation of Aaron to the high priesthood. Rashi brought it to another. The high priesthood and the appointment of the Levites as mere servants in the sanctuary. He didn't like it. However, but this happened a year before. However, Korach, in spite of the fact that he was angry, and Moshe incurred his enmity, did not attempt to come out publicly against Moshe, since he understood very well that the people, notwithstanding minor incidents, were devoted and loyal to the great leader, and that any attempt to unseat Moshe would be met with anger and derision. He waited, patiently waited for an opportunity, for an event that will somehow undermine Moshe's position and his popularity. He waited for what of it? He hated Moshe. He nursed this hatred, and he was hoping that the opportune moment will arrive. And, as a matter of fact, the opportune moment did arrive sooner than Korach anticipated. The Meraglim incident. Perhaps this was the most tragic incident in Moshe's life. The Meraglim incident episode and the subsequent decree by the Almighty that all adults die in the desert. It was a hard blow to Moses' prestige in the eyes of the crowd. For a short while, he lost the grip over the crowd. His grip over the crowd. He lost his influence. Moses promised on behalf of the Almighty. The slaves in Egypt, before they left Egypt, while they were still busy building barracks and fortresses for Pharaoh, he promised those slaves that they will enter into the promised land, into a land wherein honey is milk and honey. And they'll enter the land a short time after the departure from Egypt. Indeed, when we read Bala's they were ready to invade the Negev the second year after following the Exodus. As it is related to us in Numbers 10:29. Vayemer Moshe וחייבו בין רועי המדיוני, חסן נשא, נויסים אנחנו למוקים, אשר אומר השם, איסי אתם לכם, לכו איתנו. We are journeying to the place which the Eternal said, I shall give to you. Come down with us. What place was Moshe talking about? The promised land. We're ready to enter. Of course, they wouldn't have entered Eretz Yisrael from the east, but from the north, from the south. Suddenly, at the lightning out of the beautiful sky, their stay in the wilderness, who was extended for 39 more years. Suddenly, all the hopes, all the dreams, that soon we will invade the land flowing with milk and honey, but is dissipated, shattered. No land, no countries, no rivers of milk and honey, no realization of the promised Vadesi, who were in sight. It became a reality suddenly within the vision. Many bleak and dreary years will have to pass before Yisrael will set its foot on the soil of Canaan, the promised land. Where is Moses' pledge? We ask each other. And Korach liked those questions. Those questions are very encouraging. You realize the time is arrived.
Air conditioning work automatically here, or what?
Where is Moses' pledge? Where is his clairvoyance? Where is his prescience? Where is his prophecy?
I think we'll have to have it on from time to time.
Then people
getting hotter.
Used to talk with each other. How will it be possible to endure so much hardship and get to really wilderness?
Okay, I have someone.
39, 40 years. The people complained, but it was a complaint of hopelessness. Moses' popularity was at the low ebb. Now Korach stopped. The time has arrived, and I may reveal my plans to other people against whom Moshe discriminated. And Korach started to recruit disgruntled and frustrated people and organized a formidable opposition to Moshe. More or less, the Ramban did that. Because when the Ibn Ezra said that the incident of Korach happened immediately after the construction of the Mishkan, Rabbi said, no. It happened after the Miracle episode. And that the Ramban is right, the Ibn Ezra is wrong. We have proof, ample proof, and what did Dosan Vaviron tell Moshe when he sent for them, invited them to come over? Aflei aleret zovas holov udvosha ve'yisonu, vatiker lonu nachlasode ve'karam. You didn't bring us into the land of honey and milk, and you did not give us the share in that land. Means your promise did not come true. Interestingly, the word Vayikach. The word Vayikach was interpreted by Rashi in two ways. In one way, it's a very obscure word. I mean, the semantics of the word is very obscure. In one way, Rashi says, Lokach es atzmei letzat echot, miyesnechlat mitecho edo, ve'erer ala kuhuna. Let me translate the English, but I mean, the meaning is obscure. He betook himself on one side It is the intention of you of separating himself from the community so that he may raise a protest regarding the priesthood. It's the verbal translation of Rashi. What Rashi means, Korach made the final will. Until Korach, no one dared to impugn Moshe's authority. Right, people were angry, so they said, give us water, give us food. We remember the fresh back of Egypt. Yeah. But they stood in awe before Moshe. Korach was the first one. Mokach Hasatzman. He dared, for the first time, to separate himself from the community which was committed to Moshe, revered Moshe, loved him, despite of everything, and was loyal to him. He was the first one. I believe the Halachic Hasatzmei, he took himself means something else. He dedicated himself completely to that task. He took himself, he dedicated himself to this task. There was only one goal in Korach's life. One goal. He was ready to sacrifice his life in order to achieve that goal. Namely what? To unseat Moshe. To demote Moshe. He dedicated his whole self to this diabolical plan of undermining Moses' exalted position within the community. Vayikach means he committed himself totally to the implementation of that plan. However, it was an individual affair. It did not retain any else. He decided he hated Moses. He did not betray his hatred. He did not disclose to anybody. He waited. At the beginning, he did not reveal anything to the prospective conspirators. Yet, at the very instant, the divine decree condemning the Jews to 40-year sojourn in the wilderness was announced, Korach immediately revealed his plan to Dosson V'Aviram, because he thought that the golden opportunity has offered now. And Rashi has another pshat of Vayikach. Vayikach Moshach Roshei Sanhedroes Shebohem Bidvarim. First, he decided himself to fight against Moses, to defeat Moses, to remove him from the historical scene. Next, but he had not, he had no courage to reveal the plan to others. Following the incident with the Meraglim, his Moshach Roshei Sanhedroes, he attracted the chiefs of the Sanhedrin, of the court, by fine words, clever words, intelligent words. Chazal say, Korach shepikeach. Korach was a clever, intelligent man. How did Chazal know about it? Because he made money. He was a rich man, all right. The rich man is not only is a rich man, a clever man, intelligent. I know many stupid people who are rich, right? Because his arguments, we will analyze his arguments, are indicative of inner intelligence. So even the Rosh Sanhedroes, the heads of the court, we convinced that righteousness is on his side. And Rashi says, his fine words, he began to conspire. Now the conspiracy began. He began to conspire, to criticize, to attack, and to ridicule Moshe. Korach used all the weapons of the arsenal of the conspiracy. To some, in conversation with some, he was serious. In conversation with others, he was humorous, yes. In conversation with some, he played the role of the persecutor. in his conversation with others, he was the champion of justice. He was very capable. And he involved, interesting is the Bnei Ruvain. So Rashi said, why Bnei Ruvain? Why the tribe of Ruvain became involved so easily in the conspiracy? So Rashi says, Eilo Rosh Haveli Shvenet. Next door neighbor of Korach. So he met Korach too often, too many times. Korach succeeded in convincing. The Ramban already mentions it. But the Bnei Ruvain had also a grudge against Moshe, against Jacob. But he couldn't do anything to Jacob. So he transferred the grudge to Moshe. Because Ruvain was deprived of the Chayre, of the Hune and Levi and the Malach. They also nursed a grudge against Moses. They also felt hurt because Moses took away the chayre from them, the privilege of Malchus and Gehune. However, any conspiracy or organized movement, in order to succeed, any rebellion, in order to make headway, no matter how egotistically this rebellion is motivated, in order to make headway, to succeed, must develop an ideology. If it's a spontaneous reaction, if two people quarrel, there is no need to develop a philosophy or to quarrel on behalf of ideas, to represent ideas. But if Korach, planned the movement, it was a movement. It was a conspiracy. It was an anti-Moses movement. So such a movement cannot exist, cannot succeed, without developing the proper ideology. A motto, any movement must have a motto. A motto is indispensable. And Korach indeed did provide the philosophy of the rebellion. And the Torah is interested to tell us not only about the fact that events that transpire, but also about the ideology which Korach formulated. And simply, I believe, the Parsha is out to tell us the distinction or the difference between the Moshe's approach and Korach's approach to certain life. Let us concentrate. What would you say? How many arguments did Korach employ? How many arguments? Ideological arguments. In order to justify his attitude, his stand. How many? What would you say? How many? I believe there was only one argument. It branched out later. It's several. But I'm going to investigate basically I'm going to investigate two arguments here. First, the argument which the Torah is related at the very beginning of the story. And second, an argument which the Torah has not mentioned at all, but somehow, in a mysterious way, we don't know how, Chazal introduced the argument about the Torah. Let us concentrate first upon the most potent of all arguments that Korach advanced against Moses. Namely, with the argument which the Torah has stated at the very beginning of the story. Vayikalu al Moshe and Aharon, vayemru aleihem, rav lochem, tichol heido kulam kedushim, ubeseichom Hashem, ve'lo tisnatzu al kala Hashem. You've gone too far. For all the community is holy, all of them are holy, and the Lord is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourselves above the congregation of the Lord? It is a solidarity. Thus, the problem of leadership and exercise of power was raised. Korach thought, apparently, that Moshe seized power illegitimately. He usurped power. That Moses is a usurpator. He impugned Moses' authority. He challenged Moses. And the basis of this challenge was very simple. And at first glance, quite logical. No one can deny Korach's assertion that the whole community is holy. Is it a lie? Is it a lie of their father? Prolongation. And that every Jew possesses intrinsic sanctity and inner charismatic quality, elevating him above others. No one can deny it. This is the very essence of Knesses Yisrael. As far as covenantal choiceness and holiness are concerned, in Kedushas Israel, there is no distinction. There was no distinction between Moses and the woodchopper, between Moses and the water thrower. Not at all. No matter how simple the woodchopper is, and no matter how great in spirit Moshe was. Hence, Korach asked, and the question merits an answer. What right did Moses or Aharon have to lead, to guide, to rule? It is the age-old or millennia-old question pertaining to the principle of equality of man versus election and singling out of an individual. Let us analyze this argument. Korach was wrong. I may say this is an absolute partial. Korach was wrong because he was unaware of the twofold character of the Kedushas Israel. Had he known the mystery of the dual kedushah idea, he would not have advanced the argument. What is this twofold kedushah idea? What am I referring to? And here I must introduce a Rashi in Deuteronomy and Dvarim. The Rashi mentioned once in my shiur, but however I interpret the Rashi quite differently than I'm going to do it now. So I'm not plagiarizing myself. Kiyam kodishato v'adishem rekecho. The pasuk in Re'eh. Ubecho bochar adishem. Li Yisrael le'am zgulo. Rashi adds a few words. Kiyam kodishato kedushas atzmecho me'adisecho. Ve'yed becho bochar adishem. Very cryptic, Rashi. Because Rashi apparently could not understand why he tear the duplication in the pasuk. The Torah said, "Kam kodishato l'Hashem lekecho." Why does the Torah have to continue to say, "Ubecho bochar Hashem liYisrael ha'am zgulo"? Rashi couldn't understand it. So Rashi said, the Torah has formulated here two ideas of Kedushah. Kiyam Kodesh Ato, Kedushas Atzmecho Mavisecho, Veit, Moreover, B'chol Kochar Hashem Alekecho. Let me just translate English. Thou art holy. Your holiness comes to you from your fathers. Kedushas Atzmecho Me'avisecho. Veit, B'chol Kochar. But in addition to that kedushah, the Lord has chosen thee to be a cherished people unto himself. In other words, Rashi apparently thought that there is a twofold idea of Kedushas Yisrael. First, the community as a whole is holy, as an entity. Many times in my lecture, I try to put across the idea that Knesses Yisrael is not just a herd, not just a crowd, not just a conglomerate of people, not just a multitude of souls, but it is individuality, it's an entity, it is a personality, a living personality. Knesses Yisrael as a whole. First, the community for which we have the most beautiful term, Knesses Yisrael, the Ramban. Ramban speaks about that term in Parshas Chayesor. The most beautiful term, Knesses Yisrael, the community as a whole is holy. This kedushah of the community, the covenantal community, is inherited from our ancestors. In other words, there is a genetic code of Kedushah. You know what a genetic code is? So we think genetic biological always in terms of a biological genetic code. Rashi knew of another genetic code of Kedushah, which is transmitted most probably through the genes. Or transmitted to the soul, I don't care. Yeah. But it means it is a genetic code of Kedushah. Otherwise you cannot speak of inheritance. And that's the reason that if a baby is born to a Jewish mother, willingly the baby is considered Jewish. This is kiyam kodesh aton l'Hashem. The baby is a member of the community. The community bestows kedushah on the baby. This kedushah is inherited from our forefathers. The community is consecrated as a unitary entity, as a whole. The individual, in order to lay claim to kedushah, must draw upon the resources of kedushah available to the community. I am holy because I belong to a community. I am united with a community. I am affiliated with a community. And that community happens to be holy as a whole. So if the whole is holy, if the parts comprising the whole are also endowed with sanctity. The kedushah, this kedushah, kiyam, as it says, kiyam kodesh ato l'Hashem alekecho. You are holy as a what? As a people, as a nation, as a community. You know what Am means in Hebrew? Am in Hebrew means in, together. By being together, you are holy. It's not a separate holiness. It's not individual holiness. It's not a personal holiness. It's a together holiness. This kedushah is not a personal, intimate, but a universal, community rooted and community nourished and centered kedushah. I am holy because I'm a child of a people who inherited kedushah from its progenitor. In light of this theory, we establish, or this theory establishes, the supremacy of what? Of community over individual. You know, it's no controversy among philosophers. Whom should supremacy be assigned? The individual over the community, or the community over the individual? You know very well the American social philosophy, since the days of Jefferson, has clung stubbornly to the idea that the individual reigns supreme. But however, from the viewpoint of the unpublished after Hashem we may, seeing this controversy from the viewpoint of unpublished after Hashem, we may say that the others did not agree with Jefferson. Or the French encyclopedist philosophers of the age of reason, Montesquieu, so on and so forth. It has established the supremacy of the community over the individual. The community is of primary. The individual is of secondary significance. Again, the community is placed above the individual person. As a matter of fact, Marxism actually really subscribes to this theory, that the community is above the individual. You are consecrated to me as a people, as a nation, as a community. The individual kedushah is derived from that of the community. Hence, all kedushas are commensurate and not equal. If the individual derives his kedushah from the community, so Moshe derived as much kedushah from the community as the woodchopper did. Here justice prevails. Here is an absolute democratic approach to the partition of kedushah. There is no differentiation of kedushas from the viewpoint of the unpublished tradition. However, Yahadus was not too happy with that, not satisfied with this social aspect of kedushah. Because this aspect, if accepted as the only source of kedushah, if the community is the only source of kedushah, then the individual would be deprived of his creative role, of his individual initiative, of his originality and uniqueness. If there is one kedushah, and only one, rooted in the community, and all individuals receive share per share alike, then the genius cannot be created. The authentic person cannot develop into a great money, because there is the partition of kedushas, alike is share per share alike. Hence the Torah says that in addition to the community kedushah, there is another resource of kedushah. Where is this resource of kedushah to be found? In the individual. The individual must discover in himself this resource of kedushah. The kedushah which the individual detects in the inner recesses of his personality is already personalistic, single, unique. He is kedushah. No one has the kedushah like his. There is no share. Individual kedushah cannot be shared with somebody else. It's mine, completely mine, exclusively mine. I could paraphrase the Mama Chazal, the Shem Shepatzuteim shall be Odom, Mishunim Zeneze, Karbe Eseim, I could paraphrase and say, the Shem Shepatzuteim shall be Odom, Mishunis Zeneze, Kach Kedushas Seim. From this viewpoint, the community derives what? Kedushah from the individual. The Kedushas alone is integrated of the countless Kedushah experiences of the individual members of that community. Just the reverse of the previous vision. The single person sanctifies the community. How beautifully did the Torah state. Of course you are holy because you are a member of the holy nation. Because you are a particle or a component part of a great holy community. But at the same time, we as the Lord chosen to form a treasured people. There is a separate kedushah attached to thee as an individual, as a single person. Ubechol Korach Hashem lios, what does mean lios? Ubechol, if the Torah addresses itself to the individual, so how will you say it in English? Ubechol Korach Hashem, and God has charged thee with the mission. What? Lios, what does mean lios? To form, to create and treasure people. Before, the people perceive the individual. Now, the individual perceives the people. And we as the Lord chosen to fulfill a mission, namely what mission? Leos, to form or to create or to organize an Amsgula. Leo says the connotation in this context of forming, constituting, or creating an Amsgula. It is obvious that as far as the Bchiras Yechidim is concerned, as far as the election of the individuals is concerned, the endowments cannot be equal. Each individual receives the endowment which what? Which reflects the greatness of his personality. The individual kedushah the individual kedushah experiences are incommensurate and completely proportionate to the individual's involvement, dedication, and to the individual's depth in sleep. The kedushah is an expression of his greatness, and not all people are alike as far as greatness is concerned. The statement by Korach, העדה, כולם קדושים, is correct as long as we are speaking of the community with the Kedushas, inherited from our ancestors. Moses was born in the Jewish community, and the baby of a slave was born in the Jewish community. They received share and share alike. Their shares in the endowment of sanctity were equal. However, when we shift our attention from the social aspect to the individual aspect of Kedushah, the whole idea of equality turns into an absurdity. Korach said, כולם קדושים, ובשיחם עד השם. He emphasized the term Eido. The words Eido should be translated as the entirety of the congregation. The whole of the congregation is the source of Kedushah. However, he forgot that there is another aspect of Kedushah, the private, individual one. From that standpoint, From the standpoint of Yam Kodesh, Korach's argument would have been a solid one. Yet under the aspect, so you have to admit that Bchiras Moshe is above and beyond the Bchira of the woodchopper or the worker. Interesting is Moshe's answer. What did Moshe answer there? Beiter v'yeda Hashem eis hashalei v'es hakodesh vitzeveo v'es asher yischavei yakveveo. It's a cryptic, mysterious answer. Come morning, the Lord will make known who is his and who is holy, and will grant him access to himself. He will grant access to the one he has chosen. Moses speaks not of a congregation. Korach speaks of a congregation. Korach speaks of a congregation. The whole is holy. The part derives its kedushah from the whole. Kedushah is transmitted by the whole to its component part. Moshe speaks. He speaks about private persons. Moses speaks not of a congregation, but of an individual. Almost the same terms that the Torah speaks in Rei. Korach. From that viewpoint you are right. But another viewpoint of Moshe. And as far as Bchira is concerned, individual Bchira, personalistic Bchira is concerned, there is a difference between individual and individual. Interesting, Moshe says Beiter. Beiter v'yeda Hashem. Come morning, and the Lord will make known. You know very well what the Hadat, Ramban, Ibn Ezra, they are all. There's not a single Mephorish which has omitted this explanation. Beiter in Hebrew, according to the medieval grammarians, has the connotation of discriminating, differentiating. Leyuchal levaker, ben hasnur, ben ahuva, ben hasnur. Or leyuchal levaker, ben teiv v'ra. The differentiating between individual forms. Beiter means the period of recognition. And this is not, I would say, Drush, homiletics. That interpretation was advanced by the Rabbi, by the Ramban, by the Ibn Ezra, by the greatest grammarians of the Middle Ages. Beiter means the period of recognition, identification of things, events, and people. Erev, in contradistinction, is the time of monotony, uniformity. Erev, we say the Radak, is like Arev, Ta'aruves, mixture, merger, oneness. The time of apprehension, Erev is the time of apprehending the surroundings as one amorphous, formless mass. When all tzurot, all forms, all individuals merge into one homogeneous black reality. In the darkness, what do you see? Just a black reality, a black something. Korach, Moshe said to him, your concept of kedushah is identical with the Erev, with the bleakness of an autumnal night, whose darkness and dreariness envelops everything. All you see is one piece of formless reality called Ada. You don't see individuals. Your kedushah is Erev. Your concept of kedushah is limited, what Aristotle used to call, to the Hillel, to some amorphous mass, what the medieval philosophers call Chimera Yuli, to the primordial mixture and leveling off at specific individual traits. Of course, from the viewpoint of Erev, your argument is valid. However, there is another idea of the holy. The personal individualistic holiness, in which the human personality, with all its singular greatness and beauty, participate. This is the holiness of the morning. Baker, this is the holiness which discriminates, the holiness which sees individuals. In each individual is a world for himself. It is the holiness which does not look upon the world as a one black, formless mass, but as a colorful world full of sorrow, joy, and individual freedom, and individual greatness. This is the holiness of the morning, when the world emerges from the nightly anonymity into the individuated, distinct morphological existence. As far as this holiness is concerned, the proud is far below the individual. Each person is consecrated to a unique task that only he can perform. I believe that if you as a matter of fact, Gerus, not a popular subject now, with its two basic performances or acts, Mile and Tile, symbolically represent the two dimensions of wisdom. The universal, community-rooted concept of kedushah and the individual concept of kedushah. The convert must attain both aspects. The community-rooted social kedushah as well as the individualistic, personalistic kedushah. The Mila circumcision unites the convert with the community, with the people or nation. Through Mila, the girl becomes integrated into the community. Basically, Mila is the sign of identity. Will you stop fooling around? Sit down. Sit down and listen. The Mila unites the girl with the community, with the people or nation. Through Mila, the girl becomes integrated into the community, and by so doing, he is given the opportunity to draw upon the communal social resources of kedushah and to be a component part of the community. However, the personal element of kedushah is still missing. There can be no conversion without the acquisition of kedushah at both levels. Therefore, Tefillah was introduced. Tefillah is indicative of personal commitment. The act of Tefillah is inseparably linked up, whoever studied Tivonis once, with Kabbalah El Mitzvah, you know very well. When does the girl accept Kabbalah El Mitzvah? During Tefillah. And what is Kabbalah El Mitzvah? If not a personal commitment to God. Not to the community, not through the community, but a personal commitment on the part of the convert to God. There the convert and God face each other. The convert commits himself. The personal, individual election is attainable only after the girl separates himself from the community for a short time, retreats into isolation, hiding in the wild, immersion, and accepts responsibility not as a member of the community. That kind of responsibility. This I shall give Now I want to add something. It's also important to know. Korach charged that Moshe and Aharon were power hungry. They intentionally set up a power structure and raised themselves above the congregation. What always angers me is the elegant word Korach. The lomot is nasu, our cowardice. This nasu, you know what in Hebrew is nasu means? The regel, by the New Chadis, is nasu lemer, and niemler. And the claims are unfounded. The same as Korach was wrong. He simply did not understand the philosophy of power and leadership that you have to say power. He identified the exercise of power with kingship. And the community which is subjected to a power structure, he identified as politeia, or as the political community, or as the state. He was wrong. This equation of leader and king and the politicization of the relationship between the leader and those whom he leads, this was the equation of leader and king and the relationship between the leader and those who are led. And that is again equated as a political relationship. These two equations are one. The covenantal community, and believe me, and this is true, and every Jew should know that, the covenantal community is first and foremost not a political community. You may kill me, I would never admit it. It is a teaching community. The central figure in the covenantal community throughout the ages and millennia was not the king, never the king, nor the warrior, or high priest, but the teacher, the Rabbi. The people are not subjects, as it is customary in the political community. The people in the covenantal community are disciples. The relationship is not of a political nature. It is not rooted in violence, because any political community must use violence. A political community cannot exist without the use of violence. Nor is it connected with the application of sanctions. It is a free commitment on the part of the disciples to their master and teacher. The latter did not impose any authority upon the disciples. No one asked them to obey his word and to follow him. They can terminate this relationship at any time they decide to. You cannot terminate, it's very hard to terminate a political relationship. You know what happened in America during the Civil War? When the southern states wanted to terminate a political relationship. Judaism has disapproved basically of all forms of human government. There are definite streaks, but I want you not to misunderstand me. There are definite streaks of political anarchism in our reluctance to recognize man as king. Man, at best, is a melech havyin. And one of the topics of Rosh Hashanah is to contrast Melech Elyon and Melech Avyin. And by so contrasting, we condemn Melech Avyin. Melech Avyin is a bluffer, nothing else. A daydreamer. Because there is no Melech Avyin. Because Melech Avyin is a contradictio in adjectum. God governs. No one else must usurp this prerogative. The only power structure that the Halacha, or Judaism, has accepted is the non-institutionalized relationship prevailing between teacher and pupil, within the teaching covenantal community. Moshe is not known to us as king, even though he was king. He is known as Rabbi, Moshe Rabbeinu. He is known to us as the greatest of all teachers, as the teacher par excellence, the father of all prophets, even though he was also king, warrior, etc. Aaron is not just a high priest. He is the great teacher. The priests themselves are not just charismatic personalities. Their sanctity is associated with the teachings they engaged. The disciples love their master and listen not to his orders, since he gives none, but to his teachings, which enlighten their minds and gladden their hearts. Moses did not raise himself above the community, as Korach stated and Korach thought, but he was raised by the community above itself. It was raised by the congregation to the exalted heights of a spiritual, not political malchut. And as a matter of fact, spiritual malchut is by far more powerful and more enduring than political malchut. The reflexiforem velomutis nasu is out of context. It was wrong. Moses was elevated without questing for leadership. He was not a misnase, but a nasu, or niso. The leader who is the great teacher is the holy man. The teacher is certainly elected by God to be near him, and his personal kedushah transcends that of his disciples. Kedushah, there is equation. Kedushah, teaching. The saintly person is the leader, and at the same time, because he is the teacher. Now let us pick up this second argument of Korach. The second argument of Korach has not been mentioned in the Bible. Rashi quotes from Tanchumim and tells us the following humorous story. Omar v'kineis reish nun Rosh Sanhedrios v'yobishon talistes shekulam tcheres bo v'omdu lifnei Moshe אמרו לי, טלי שכולה תחילס חייבס בציצי ספטורה. אמר להם, חייבס. הסחילו לשחק עליו. איך שהטלי של מנחם, חותכות של תחילס פטרו, זו שכולה תחילס, לתפטר את עצמו. He attired Korach 250 chiefs of the court of Sahel in robes of tchilas. Purple, blue, I don't know. Purple wool, let's be purple. Then they came and stood before Moses and said to him, is a garment that is entirely of purple subject to the law of tzitzis, or is it exempt? It is subject to the law, answered Moshe. Moshe was alarmed. Certainly. If they'd asked me, I would also say subject. Whereupon they began to jeer at him. Is it possible? Is this possible? They asked. A robe of any different colored material, one thread of purple. If you attach one thread of purple, it is exempted from the obligation of tzitzis. And the robe that is entirely of purple should not be exempt. The Midrash tells us another story, which is similar to that of Tcheres. Namely, they ask Moshe a second question. Should one attach a mezuzah to the doorpost of a house filled with skulls, with Sifrei Torah? Moses answered in the affirmative, of course. They jeered again and said, is it possible? The two short sections, Shema Vohim Shomea, are enough in order to exempt the house from the obligation of mezuzah, while a multitude of Sifrei Torah does not exempt the house from Chidas mezuzah. What is the Medrash out to tell us about these two stories? These stories are similar. They're almost, the motif is identical. And what is the Medrash out to tell us? Apparently the Medrash felt that these two stories which have touch of sarcasm and humor as well, will apparently reflect the whole philosophy of Korach and what he wanted. He says, I told you, Korach developed an ideology. He had a substitute for Terah's mission. He wanted to achieve something, because he wanted to take honor. But the Medrash, who wants to bring out, by relating to us, this sarcastically and good humoredly, these two stories, this I believe is obvious. And I would ask people to give me attention, because it's very important. Important as far as our times are concerned. Korach rebelled against authority. All Jews are equal. Hence, everyone is entitled to interpret the law. It was a question of interpretation of the law. You see, that's why the Midrash introduced the story about the Tcheles, about the mezuzah, that Korach not only wanted political power, he wanted to remove Moshe from office and succeed Moshe as king. No, he wanted to succeed Moshe as Rabbi. That generations, countless generations afterward, should say Korach Rabbeinu. That was his ambition. Yeah, doesn't sound right. That was his ambition, you understand? So hence, he's not only impugned and challenged Moshe's authority as king, political authority, but he challenged his halachic authority. Can Moshe interpret the law? Is Moshe Alam? The study of the law, Korach, and to show unto them, I have to interrupt myself, and to show to the people, to the 250 scholars, the chief justices, that Moshe is incapable of interpreting the law. So he posed to Moshe those two questions. Moshe answered in the affirmative, while the 250 scholars, I don't know, I wouldn't have given them smirre, but if 250 scholars have decided that Moshe is wrong, not only Moshe is wrong, they jeered at him, they laughed at him. It was to them nonsense, absurd. The study of the law, apparently, Korach argued. The study of the law and its interpretation, Korach argued, are exoteric acts, democratic acts, in which every intelligent person may engage. Moses' claim to being the exclusive legal authority and exclusive interpreter of the law, Korach argues, are unfounded and unwarranted. The consequence of such a democratic philosophy is obvious. What Korach wanted, and what many want even now, and I'm not speaking only about dissident groups, but I'm speaking about the Orthodox community. What Korach wanted, and what many dissident groups want now, whether they state it clearly or they use equivocal terms in dubious language to cover it up, is that the instrument of interpretation of the Torah be common sense, or the everyday empirical intelligence, not the esoteric conceptualizing logos, which can only be attained through painstaking study and hard training. In Hebrew, we have three terms which signify the human intellectual gesture. You all know Chochmah Bina Das. I'm not going to analyze those three terms, but I want to show you just one distinction. Das denotes, particularly in Talmudic language, common sense. Not wisdom, common sense. Sound practical judgment. We come across the expressions Ben Das. What Ben Das mean? An average intelligent person, not an idiot. Oder Nitra Verdeite. What mean Nitra Verdeite mean? He lost his reason, reasonableness. You're correct. A person deprived of Das is an idiot. Senseless, foolish. In contradistinction to Das, Chochmah Bina refer to scholarship, to specialized knowledge, to a trained logos, to an intellect which was subjected to training and criticism for a long time, to the precise, exact intellect. The Korach group pleaded the case of common sense or Das. They argued that every Jew with common sense should have the right to interpret the laws of the Torah and determine halachic matters in categories in common sense categories. There are different categories coming here. As a matter of fact, right here, the ritual committees in the non-Orthodox synagogues, or perhaps even in Orthodox synagogues, employ common sense in reaching halachic decisions. In fact, all reform movements, from the Tzdukim during the Second Commonwealth down to religious liberalism of today, pleaded the cause of common sense as the instrument of interpretation. I'll give you an example. The Tzdukim of old said, the Mishnah Yadayim tells us, that the daughter inherits the estate of the father if the son died and left only a daughter. If there is a problem, if there is litigation between the daughter of the father and the granddaughter of the father, then the daughter of the father should get the estate. You know what the Kedushim said. Kedushim said that if there is litigation between the daughter of the father, of the deceased father, and the granddaughter, who gets the estate? The granddaughter. The Kedushim kept on arguing that it will be unjust to discriminate against the legitimate rights of the daughter of the deceased, the Zukim, yes. Yeah, the Zukim kept on arguing that it would be unjust to discriminate against the legitimate rights of the daughter of the deceased if the heir on the opposite side, its opposite number, is also a daughter, but not the daughter of the father, but a daughter of the son. Why should the real daughter surrender the estate to a granddaughter who is not closer, who is not as closely related to the father as she is? What do you say about it? From the viewpoint of common sense, of the exoteric, empirical intelligence, the Tzdukim were right. Right? Well, it makes a great deal of sense. However, in fact, under the aspect of common sense, or the way practical approach, Korach's argument against Moshe's decision was also valid. If one purple thread is sufficient, why should a purple garment require tzitzis? If one can fulfill mitzvahs mezuzah by attaching two parashiyot to the door, why should not the presence of many scrolls in the house exempt the latter from the need of a mezuzah? However, and this is basically now a trend in the Jewish communities, in Orthodox communities, to introduce common sense as an instrument of interpretation. I know what I'm talking about. Some here, I believe, would understand me. However, Torah Shabbat Peh cannot be identified with common sense, with das. It is Chochmah. It has a methodology of its own. It has a singular approach. It has a distinct form of analysis. It has its own categories and its own strange schemata. Fundamentally, the Torah Shabbat Peh avails itself of a method of conceptualization. Whoever knows what Torah Shabbat Peh is and the method of teaching Torah Shabbat Peh, particularly the method which was forged by Rabbi Kveger, some say that Kveger, the Siddhis of Chaim Brisker. Chaim Brisker actually has developed this method to dizzying heights. Is Lomdes, basically. What do you call Lomdes? Consists in the ability to conceptualize the halacha. We conceptualize Sukkah, we conceptualize Basar B'Cholov, we conceptualize Tahuves, we conceptualize the whole Torah. The halacha works like the mathematician in an a priori world. Its constructs are ideal. Torah Shabbat Peh does not study reality. It prepares abstract schemata and applies them to the world of sense. And I'll give you an example. In fact, Aristotle and the entire Greek science, which unfortunately dominated the Western world throughout the antiquity and the Middle Ages, failed miserably. Aristotelian physics, I don't say Aristotelian philosophy, Aristotelian logic, but Aristotelian physics failed miserably. You know why? Because its foundation was common sense. The empirical human intelligence, which operates usually with platitudes and commonplace ideas. The great accomplishment of Galileo and Newton consisted in replacing the practical common sense approach with a conceptualizing, creative logos. With that, we all call now the scientific logos. What is scientific logos? What's the difference in scientific logos and the lay logos? Of course, the scientific logos is trained. The lay logos is not trained. Scientific logos is precise, the lay logos is not precise. But what is the main difference? The main difference, the scientific logos conceptualizes reality, while the lay logos, or the common sense logos, takes reality at its face value. They proclaim the principle, Galileo and Newton, of mathematization and quantification of reality, of converting sense qualities, like heat, like light, color, like sound, into quantitative relations, mathematical relations. Now I'll give you an example. Aristotle, for instance, said, all things fall downwards because they are heavy. This, in other words, he considered the gravitational pull as a result of heaviness or weight. This is nonsense. The reverse is true. Weight is the consequence of the gravitational pull. Newton discarded common sense and approached the matter from the viewpoint of the esoteric, abstract, creative, conceptualizing logos, and came up with his famous formula, gravitation equals the product of both masses over the square of the distance. over D, doing second potency. In other words, gravitational pull is nothing but a mathematical relation between two bodies, which consists of the product of the masses over the square of the distance. This method of quantification was perhaps the greatest discovery in the annals of mankind. Of course, if we had been satisfied that we, what is the 17th century, had been satisfied with Aristotelian physics, we couldn't climb now to the moon. So, well, don't you think that Allah is also entitled to such a prerogative? We have, as I stated above, our unique, logical and epistemological approach to halacha. Basically, Torah Shebal Peh is not just a compilation of laws. It is a compilation of laws, but it's more than that. Mathematics is not just a corpus of equations. Ask any mathematician who is intelligent, not stupid. What is math? He wouldn't tell you it's a corpus of equations. Or no physicist who understands physics. No physicist will tell you that physics is a collection of natural laws or equations. Basically, science is a method. Mathematics is a method. Physics is a method. It's a method of thinking. A unique logos. So is the Torah Shebal Peh. The laws and statutes are of utmost significance. However, if you discard the view that Torah Shebal Peh is a system of thought structures and logical categories, unique logical categories, which are accessible to the mind, to the human mind, only if the latter is ready to subject itself to a rigid and tough training, then you open up the floodgate, and any ignoramus may claim authority, the way Korach did. I'll give you an example, for instance. You know now the movement of the women leap. All right, and the complaints against Torah Shebal Peh, against our halacha. Halacha has discriminated against the woman. The woman is not an equal of man in halacha. That's what I hear. And many rabbis are ready to surrender. Right. In order to please a few ladies of the women leap. Basically, whoever studied Chumash and knows Chumash well, whoever studied the Gemara knows this discharge is sheer liable. Since the Chumash in Bereshit says that God created man, Zochor and Kiva Boreisa, Bitzel and Elikim Boreisa, that man and a woman were created in the image of God. Equality is taken for granted. If two persona are created in the image of God, you cannot say one is superior to the other. So people come out always and say, why is women postulators disqualified to bear witness? Disqualification to bear witness is completely, if you speak in terms of Korach, of common sense, or Aristotelian terms of common sense, it's a good argument. Since at the wedding, I'll look for another witness. I'm one witness, kosher ladies, and I look many a time, I look for another witness, and I don't find it. Quite often I can't find another witness who is Hashem or Mitzvah. And I don't invite a woman to witness the ceremony and sanction the ceremony. Apparently she's inferior to the male. It is not correct. If the Melech HaMashiach were not present at the wedding, I wouldn't invite him either, because he's also disqualified to bear witness. So will you say that all Jews are superior to the Melech HaMashiach? King Messiah, king is disqualified to bear witness, like a Isha. Midaraisa. Will you say that the King Messiah, or King David, or King Solomon, or Moshe Rabbeinu himself, who were disqualified to bear witness? A melech is postulated, I can't help it. But would you derive, the conclusion from it? That David, Moses, and a woodchopper, an ignorant person, a poor midaraisa is postulated. If observes the mitzvahs. Will you say that the psulators can be translated into axiological terms, and the conclusion would be warranted and justified to say that the King Messiah, the Melech HaMashiach, is inferior to some ignorant Jew? If you operate with common sense categories, yes. Korach operated with common sense categories, and he was right in his conclusion that Atalas Tcheles, if the whole robe is made of purple material, certainly should be exempt from the need of teachers. But from the viewpoint of what shall I say, of the exact, precise, unique halachic categories, from the viewpoint of thoughts, halachic thought structure, is not indicative at all of the station of the woman in society, in the halachic community. The same is true about the minyan. We don't count a woman. Of course. Does it mean that the woman is inferior? It's very strange, I said it in my yahrzeit, that the greatest teacher of all pertaining to prayer was a woman. The Gemara says, if not for Hannah, we wouldn't be able to pray. So Hannah was the greatest of all teachers pertaining to prayer. But Hannah herself couldn't have joined the minyan. Does it mean that Hannah was inferior to some ignorant person who was counted among the 10? Not at all. In categories, in common sense categories, yes. But in strict halachic categories, in the strict original halachic categories, is the fact that the woman cannot be counted as the 10th person, 10th or the 9th, as a member of the congregation, has absolutely nothing in common with the axiological problem of equality of male and female. The trouble now is that many people, since to be alam is very hard, you have to work very hard at it. So many people is ready to exchange alumnus for common sense categories. Now let me explain. The adherents of the common sense halacha, no matter what they call it, whether they call it meaningful halacha, creative halacha, new halacha, there are quite a variety of terms. I'm never impressed by terms and cliches. But actually what they want is common sense halacha. Are misled by a basic philosophical doctrine containing half-truth and platitudes. They expound, since the days of Korach, more or less a theory of religious subjectivism. Prima facie, it is hard to refute this theory. It was, as I told you, it was hard to refute Korach's argument of העדה כולם. Because both arguments contain a kernel of truth. They say, probably you heard it quite often, Rachmone Libeboy, God is interested in the heart, in man's inner world. Faith, fundamentally, is an inner experience. Man, they say, meets God in the mysterious recesses of his personality. The God experience is iridescent, dynamic, bold, and breaks through the exterior of the human personality and turns into objective deeds, into action. In a word, they claim, and this is the theory, the philosophy of religious subjectivism, which is so popular now in the United States. I mean, it's known under the name, under the trademark of existentialism, religious existentialism. In a word, they say the mitzvot manifest an inner mood, a spiritual quest, a hidden feeling of happiness or sadness. The mitzvot are supposed to reflect the inner experience. The mitzvot, according to them, are external correlates which run parallel to the experiential order. Each experience has its external correlate in the form of action. If this theory, they argue, is correct, then the mitzvot have got to correspond to the mood which they are supposed to express in the most competent way. Hence, the mitzvot must avail themselves of the media of expression which are best fitted to reflect the inner experience. And they argue the scholars live in a world of abstractions, cannot determine the redemptive power of mitzvot. Only a common sense approach is capable of gauging the therapeutic energy of each mitzvah and to utilize it in the most efficient manner. Korach said to Moses, the blue thread was meant as a reminder to make us think of something, of distance, infinity, of the mysterious link between the blue sea and the blue sky. Why is it necessary to limit this symbolism to a thread and not extend it to the whole garment? From the standpoint again of common sense, Halacha, Korach was right. A beautiful purple robe may have a greater impact upon the individual than a single thread. I agree with the preamble of this theory, always the preamble of the theory, that there are two parallel religious orders in Judaism, the objective and the subjective. Judaism, in my opinion, consists of two things: divine disciplines, call it Shulchan Aruch, or any other name, and the great romance between finitude and infinity, between God and man. We have a score in our Tanakh, in our canon, which deals exclusively with this great romance, human shiur. Both deed and experience are inseparably united. The deed without experience is an incomplete act, an imperfect gesture, no doubt about it. As a matter of fact, whatever I say in this context is correct from the viewpoint of strict halachic thinking. The question is, it's very easy to say, Judaism consists of a double order, and software of an external order of action, of deeds, or divine disciplines, and an inner experience, or an inner feeling of love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for God. The question is, you have to prove it. Is Allah cognizant of experiential moments? And the problem is, you cannot just say, because I like it, or because if I like it, or people will come to listen to me. How can you prove it that Allah is interested in experience? Exactly, because certain mitzvahs consist in experience. And I am not referring to the mitzvah of love of God or the mitzvah of love of man. I am referring to ritual mitzvahs. For instance, the Kriyashma, even though it is strictly, identified with the recital of a certain fixed and standardized text. However, the Tima mitzvah is kiyum b'lev, is an experience. The same is true of Tefillah, Avelim Shalem. The same most probably is true of Avelis. The same is true of Simchas Yom Tov. Notwithstanding the halachic requirement for the recital of standardized text or the observance of external rites, the mitzvahs are consummated, like Avelis, Krishma, Tefillah, and realized in an experience. In other words, even the formal abstract halacha knows of the experience as an important part of the religious gesture. However, and here we reach the boundary. The religious experience is not the primary gesture. It is the secondary. The point of departure must never be the inner subjective experience, no matter how redemptive it is, no matter how colorful it is, no matter how therapeutic it is, no matter how great the impact the experience has upon the total personality of man. It should never be the point of departure. The point of departure must always be the objective external act. The latter, the objective act, does not symbolically express or interpret the experience. Here they made a mistake. The reverse is true. The experience interprets the act. There are a variety of reasons justifying our thesis concerning the supremacy of the act over the feeling, the supremacy of the solid religious reality or over the emotion. First reason is the religious emotion is changeable, volatile, and transient, like another emotion. Second, each individual experiences God, man, and the world at a religious level in a unique fashion. If the religious act would have to adjust itself to the inner feelings of man, we would have to invent a constantly changing ritual. What the appropriate medium is today will be absolute, or the appropriate medium of expression is today will be obsolete tomorrow. What is good for me does not behoove my next door neighbor. There would be, if the religious experience were the point of departure, and the religious act would have to correspond to the experience, there would be a variety of symbolic actions. We could not speak of a monistic service of God. This kind of ever-changing worship is idolatrous, basically. Interesting is the Rashi in Korach. Omar Meishel Korach. If the Kechovim Yeshlem Elohu Sarve. The pagans have many gods. Keanim Harve, many priests. Vavedis Harve, in many forms of worship. Onu, Yeshlonu, Kein Echot, we have one God. Kein Echot, one high priest. Vavedu Achas, one form of worship. Monistic worship is constant. And monistic worship is not exposed to the winds of change. There is another reason for giving priority to the act over the experience. It is simply impossible to determine what is what and who is who. We can never determine what is a religious experience in contradistinction to a hedonic, mundane experience. We know of many non-religious emotions, hedonic emotions, which are provided with enormous power. They are hypnotic and at first glance redemptive. One may easily confuse the religious drive with the love impulse. It is quite normal to replace the religious ecstatic craving with the aesthetic yearning of the artist. There are common characteristics in both of them. The quest for exaltedness and infinity is typical of both, of the experience of beauty and the religious experience. To substitute secular for religious emotions is again an idolatrous method. The pagans of old used to indulge in hypnotic orgiastic ceremonials and mistakenly identifying them with the religious experience. The Torah prohibited idolatrous practices to be introduced in the ritual and service of God. How did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. Thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God. The Torah had exactly in mind the idolatrous, uninhibited, frenzied, hedonic experiences which the pagans engaged into, confusing them with the religious experience. The rousing of religious awareness by confronting it with the powerful hypnosis of the aesthetic experience, such as music, plastic art, architecture, is alien to Halachic Judaism. For instance, take the organ as an instrument. What's the purpose of the organ? What's the purpose of the organ? The organ serves a purpose. What's the purpose of the organ? Prepare a mood. The organ does not prepare a religious mood, because the organ itself is an instrument not of religious experience, but of the artistic experience. So use an artistic experience in order somehow to pave the way for religious mood. The religious mood will never come. The way will be paved by an aesthetic experience. The same is true if you dance. The dance may rouse a person. Of course. Yes, it's stimulating. The rhythm itself is intoxicating. But all the rhythm of dancing is a secular experience. It's not a religious experience. It's an aesthetic experience. You expect that the aesthetic experience will pave the way for a religious experience which will follow the aesthetic experience. That will never happen. will never happen again. Particularly, and that is basically idolaters. And in my opinion, that is the real reason for the elimination of the organ from the service, or the non-introduction of the organ into the service. Yehadus wanted, and I'll tell you somewhat, that the religious experience be born in a world of its own, not stimulated or roused by a secular, mundane, hedonic experience. And of course, and if we use as a stimulate the love experience, then it becomes abominable. Yes, this is idolatry par excellence. The religious experience is born within the religious awareness, not under the pressure of physiological carnal drives, not even provoked by spiritual needs of the human personality, such as the need for beauty. The same purpose served the architecture of the cathedrals in the Middle Ages, in particular the Gothic architecture. Whoever is acquainted with Spengler's book, the decline of the Western world, the West, how he interprets in his writing that the Gothic experience, the Gothic cathedral, wanted to arouse in the human personality, the experience of infinity, of boundlessness, of questing, up into the heavens. Of course, perhaps it may actually provoke such an experience, produce such a quest, but it is an artistic quest, it's not a religious quest. And to substitute an artistic quest for a religious quest is idolatrous. You know very well, never mind it. Now people speak about architecture of synagogues. There was no architecture of synagogues. We never cared about it. The Jewish synagogue was a plain home. We never tried to influence the Jew by bringing him into surroundings suggesting a transcendental order or otherworldliness. We never tried to do it. Catholics, yes. The whole mass, the music, the architecture, are geared to that purpose, to stimulate in the person an aesthetic experience, hoping that by this stimulation, the worshipper will also be aroused to a religious experience. And this is correct. This is absolutely wrong. The religious experience is autonomous, free and original, moves at its own tempo, within its own unique orbit. This kind of independent experience follows, follows the deed instead of preceding it. To pray, and after prayer, to engage in a dance or in a song, it's okay. However, to dance in order to pray is futile, because one will never pray. The Yehadus expected the religious experience to follow the religious act. The great romance follows the divine disciplines, not the reverse. Moshe said, if one fulfills mitzvah sitzes, then a glance at the thread, at the purple thread, will produce in him perhaps the experience of infinity. If you proceed from action to experience, then the purple color will remind you of the mystery of existence and our link with God. However, if one fails to conform to the Halachic norm and And contrary to the rules of halacha, avails himself of a common sense approach, the looking or the glancing at the tchilas will not produce any reaction. And if a response will be forthcoming, it will be a mundane, hedonic response, not a religious response. It will not enhance my religious experience. Blue, the experience of blue, if it follows the kiyum mitzvah, is a great experience. But the experience of blue without the kiyum mitzvah can produce him a vulgar association, vulgar memories, unredeemed experiences. When I hear people talk about meaningful halacha, the unfreezing of the halacha, empirical halacha, I know what the people have in mind by all the jargon. They have in mind exactly what Korach and his adherents had when they approached Moses with the problem of Talish Pilatreles. They wanted a common sense interpretive approach to halacha. They simply had no patience to study, to get the proper training, and to master the unique halachic methodology and logic. They rebelled against the institution of Lomdes. They want to do to halacha what Aristotle did to physics, to convert it into a shallow discipline, replete with platitudes and commonplace ordinary opinions. Of course, Moshe won. The Korach group finally admitted that Moshe emes v'Torah emes. We still study the halacha in light of Moshe's esoteric conceptualizing logic. The Masorah of method, of halachic structures and a priori constructs will continue forever. V'iktirolov K'tira samim b'beker b'tives aneres yaktereno u'ba'alei sarenes aneres ben arboim yaktereno. And Aaron shall burn thereon incense. Every morning he dresses the candles. He shall burn it. And when Aaron lights the candles, the lamps, at dusk, he shall burn it. The burning of the incense and the lighting of the lamps will be merged by the Torah in the one mitzvah. As a matter of fact, whoever studies Scotching, well knows that there is a separate view of combining Adlokas and Eres with Aktoras and Eres. There is a separate view of lighting the candles almost simultaneously with the burning of the Torahs. What does Adlokas and Eres signify? Light, understanding, knowledge of the Torah, clarity of concept, and the depth of halachic analysis. The clear deed, the intelligent performance. What does Kedushas represent? The hidden and the intimate. The mysterium magnum of creation and the mysterium tremendum of divine presence in creation and beyond. The chisa anan Kedushas as a Kedushas, and the cloud of incense may cover the ark. Kedushas tells us a great story of human craving for God, his questing and yearning for the origin. For the makor, for the beginning of all, Kedushas, the symbol, tells us a marvelous story of human tragic waiting for an ecstatic unity with the Almighty. The colorful religious experience is represented by Kedushas. The clear, intelligent, religious thought and intelligent action is represented by the candles, by the menorah. The Torah, however, admonished us that the burning of the incense be coordinated with the lighting, the mystery of feeling with the clarity of thinking and acting, the excitement and passion of craving be united with the serenity and peace of halachic comprehension and halachic implementation. Both are necessary. Yes, there is a parallel order of experience and deed, of romance and history, of thought and feeling. Yes. Necessary. Yet Kedushas cannot be separated from Adlokas Haneros. The subjective must never be isolated from the objective. And the Origination Schartem cannot be severed from the Psil Tchilas. The halachic detail and halachic precision is necessary if one wants to attain the great, colorful religious experience.